রিভার্বটা কেটে দিন। রিভার্ব
Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahi Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahi. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let there be peace and harmony in the hearts of all. So the subject, as you know, today for discussion is spiritual solutions to contemporary political problems. Actually, I am not focusing on the political problems, but still they will be part of the discussion. So, you know, there are a number of platforms, number of debates going on, the political problems we are confronting today. I mean, the collapse of the monarchies, the emergence of democracy, then the great things, the terrible things happened in 20th century, the First World War, the Second World War, the emergence of communism and imperialism and capitalism. And in this country, for example, the emergence of the military-industrial complex and the new values, all these are part of the political landscape of the last 200 years. Actually, I'm trying to connect the world that we are living in today with some ancient concepts, ancient ideas found in the Vedic literature. Because there's no point in conducting a debate on political problems as such. But some of the spiritual ideas found in the Vedic literature, which can give some clues on how to confront the problems we are facing today. Part of the problems, according to some scholars that we are part of the problem for, that we are finding today in this world are due to the emphasis on the Western democratic model and attempts to impose Western democratic values and models on some ancient civilizations which are not ready for it because of some cultural, historical, and political reasons linked to their own evolution into a modern nation state. Well, this may look a very ponderous, bombastic, disconnected statement, but I can drive home this idea by giving some very simple, vivid examples that you can see if you read today's news media, social media, or newspapers. Suppose you are trying to impose the modern Western democratic institutions and values in an ancient civilization like China. What happens? To give an example, then I shall come to the great Vedas, of course. It's a long distance in terms of history and evolution. Now, China is a country, it is homogeneous in terms of culture and language, but totally heterogeneous in terms of customs and habits in small principalities. And then they are a nation more used to some kind of a monarchic or autocratic or semi-autocratic systems. So they don't care for what a Western politicians, political scientists may consider essential for a modern nation state, like women's rights, freedom of speech, the way it is understood and interpreted and defined in Western democratic models. They may not have any relevance for an ancient civilization which has survived for more than 4,000 years. So, for example, an Englishman or American is naturally inclined to obey the rules and regulations of the nation state. But that's not how that kind of law-abiding, the natural inclination to obey the laws of a federation or a state, you won't find in many of the ancient civilizations. I can give you a clear idea what this means. In 2012, an old monk came from India, and I was taking him around in San Francisco. He was a very old Swamiji who was only familiar with the Indian way of life. Now, as we were walking, he found the drivers stopped on both sides of the street as we were trying to cross the street. The Swami thought it was because the drivers of these cabs were full of respect for monks, as you find in Cambodia, Thailand, or India. Then I told him it's not because of respect for you, but because they have to pay $500 as tickets. That's why they are stopping there, allowing you to cross the street. Because they obey the law. Now the natural law-abiding nature of that mostly found more commonly among the Anglo-Saxon democracies, Australia, US, Canada, UK, and so on. Now, that kind of law-abiding nature you don't find in many of the ancient civilizations. Not because they are lawless, but because of certain factors, certain elements linked to their own evolution as a culture and as a nation. Because here, there was a lot of lawlessness mixed with terrible violence in the 19th century. All through 19th century, maybe close to the beginning of 20th century. So, a strong law enforcement system is an integral, essential part of national life in a country like America. So you have a wonderful law enforcement system. But in India, or in China for that matter, there were small tribal communes where the village elders defined the laws and customs for the people in the village to follow. And it went on like that for, let's say, 5 millennia. This is an interesting thing. So what I mean to say, and they don't much care for the so-called human rights as defined in Western democracies. So if you expect them to follow those rules and regulations and human rights, they may not be able to understand it. There'll be problems, maybe nations may disintegrate. India is one exception. You look at India and its neighborhood. A huge country with 1.4 billion population. So diverse, India is much more diverse than entire Europe put together. If I have to interact with somebody 100 miles away, 100 miles away, I have to speak in English, but I understand his language. His language may be 2,000 years old. It's also my language. So I have to use English, or among scholars in ancient times, they use Sanskrit. So much diversity is almost inconceivable for many Western students who have not understood the diversity, the mind-boggling diversity of India, even to conceive of the kind of diverse conditions. So, in such a country, because of the inherent diversity and the emphasis on harmony and humanity, spiritual humanism that's found in Vedic literature, India remains a democracy, unlike its immediate neighbors, which I'm not going to details. So, to give an example, what I mean to say, Western democratic models may not always work in ancient civilizations, except in countries like India, which has got the blessing of the Vedic heritage. So this is one important thing. So I'm not going to take up this subject in a big way. But one thing that I want to mention is there are certain universal human values which are important for all nations and all cultures, which are actually found in many of the great Western democratic role models that you find today. Freedom of speech and freedom to worship as people like, freedom to believe in religions, and so on. You can be an atheist if you want, an agnostic, or you can be a traditional believer in God. You can be a traditional churchgoer. Everything is allowed. That's some sublime aspect of Western democratic ideas. But then see the other side. This very liberal attitude can indirectly lead to collapse of families. Too much of freedom. So children leaving their families, their parents when they're 17 years old, 16 years old, and the collapse of the family, the institution of family life. That's a negative aspect of the extreme liberalism found in Western democratic role models. In ancient civilizations, if you go to China, you find people who live together, 3 generations, at least in traditional families. So Japan, also India. Not now, perhaps, not as much as it used to be till 20 years ago, but still as a concept, it is very much there. So, but at the same time, the absence of the same kind of liberalism and human rights as understood in Western democratic role models, which means all these political systems have their own advantages and also their own disadvantages. What it essentially means is we cannot have a perfect political system. It is elusive, it is an impossibility. But many of the problems that we find in political ideologies, in political institutions, can be resolved if we bring in the idea of universal spiritual humanism and spiritual values. So spiritual values can certainly provide a lot of solutions to many of the problems that we are facing today. If we can link, for example, greed. If you look at the history of the world, civilization for the last 500 years, the discovery of new continents, the human greed to go to distant lands, conquer, sometimes even wipe out populations by genocide, take the resources, bringing back to European countries. Mostly it happened in the case of Great Britain, UK, and the great cities, industrial cities of Manchester, Glasgow, Newcastle, or grew. On the other hand, the ancient weaving traditions, the ancient textile industry of countries like India and China collapsed and just vanished. The greed for cheap resources and bringing the resources to one's own country after conquering and wiping out the native populations and growing more and more wealth and becoming more and more greedy, which in a way was supported, unfortunately, by industrial revolution and many innovations that took place in modern science and technology, right from the middle of 18th century onwards, which culminated in our own times with information technology, internet, and so on. So you find that greed for the resources of Mother Earth, the greed and urge to monopolize Mother Earth and all these resources, forgetting that we are only visiting guests to this earth. We are not permanent residents. So it is stated that an average human being can live only for about 28,000 days, 79 or 80 years, or less, or more or less. And he breathes for 22,000 times, breathing in, breathing out. And every breath, every day, is leading every human being closer and closer to the graveyard. But we don't always remember this. In fact, one of the great contributions of Vedic literature is you make use of this earth, you live in this world, enjoy as much as you want, but remember, you are not going to be permanent in this world, on this earth. You are only a visitor to this earth. So, in one of the suktas called Atharva Veda, it's called Bhu Suktam, a hymn dedicated to Mother Earth, which addresses Earth as Mother and clouds as Father. Parjanya Pida. Yes. So, Bhumi Mata. Earth is Mother and clouds constitute the Father figure. It is a very mystical, idealistic poem which tells us that every animal in this world has a right to exist. So also every piece of cloud, every drop of water, every plant, everything in this world has a right to exist. You may live longer than some animals, and maybe your lifespan may be shorter than some other animals. But still, we are all guests on this earth. So today, I am going to discuss some of these great ideas found in the Vedic literature, which teaches us to live, how to live in perfect harmony with nature, with perfect harmony with Mother Earth. Because most of the wars, indirectly, even Iraq war, there are scholars who argue it was just to get waters from Euphrates and Tigris. There are different views. I'm not entering those areas of conflicting opinions because these subjects are discussed in hundreds of platforms all over the world. So I want to limit our discussion to this grand idea that we are only visitors, guests coming to this earth, live for 100 years. As I mentioned, 28,000 days. That's all. Which is almost a minuscule, almost a microscopic, small fragment of time. So I am coming to this subject now. This Bhu Suktam, that's the subject inform us. Now, this Bhu Suktam, it looks upon life itself as an act of self-sacrifice. Self-sacrifice, not self-demolition, but it means self-renunciation. Renouncing our own selfish needs. At the same time, making all possible use of the gifts that Mother Earth has placed in front of you. A mother's property belongs to children, so also we have every right to make use of the blessings of Mother Earth. But we should not exploit, we should not consider ourselves to have the monopoly of the properties, the gifts of earth. So, of course, the word yajna is used here. I want to mention that point. The word yajna means living in perfect harmony, serenity, peace, coordination, with a higher ideal in front of us. If we can connect our worldly ideas, values of worldly life, to some higher spiritual ideal, something transcendental, then it becomes yajna. In fact, one of the commentators say, yajna vai seshtatamam karma. Yajna means nothing. Any noble act, any noble word, any noble thought, which harmonizes others, which brings in an harmony and peace on this earth is yajna. If we do something to help others, if you spread some good ideas, ano bhadra kritavayandu vishwataka, there is a prayer in connection with this. Let good thoughts, noble thoughts come to us from everywhere. Now, what it means is, life is a yajna, and our relationship with Mother Earth itself is yajna. And also, in the same context, the Vedic text says something interesting. It also says about family life. For example, it says, married life of husband and wife constitutes a yajna. Means it's a joint pilgrimage in search of a higher spiritual ideal. There is interestingly, it is linked to the etymology, the grammatical structure of the word, Sanskrit word used for wife. It's called patni is the word used. Panini was the great commentator, and also the great commentator of the Vedic phonetics like Shiksha, Panini, Shiksha. But he also is the father of Sanskrit grammar, who lived in 9th century BC. He wrote Ashtadhyayi, 8 chapters, 8 dhyayas. And he says, Patirno yajna samyogi. That means a wife is a joint participant in yajna along with husband. So the idea that everything in this world should be worked out as some kind of a yajna based on the foundation of harmony and peace. Yajnartha karmanonyatra lokoyam karma bandhana dhartham karma kundeya mukta sangha samachara. The Gita it is said, if we don't bring this yajna ideal in our own individual or family life, and also in our interaction with Mother Earth, the result is there will be conflicts, disease, famine, global warming, and floods, and of course wars, because the human greed, human urge, man's urge to monopolize the resources of Mother Earth, leading to war, leading to genocide, leading to violence, and so on. So I shall come to this interesting Vedic hymn, and today I shall try to emphasize some of these points. This is found in Atharva Veda in a different form called Prithvi Suktam in Yajurveda also. It begins with this, Sano bhumis twisham belam rashtre dadhad uttame. It means that's how it begins. Girayaste parvada himavando aranyam te prithvi syonamastu vabhrum krishnam rohinim visharubam dhruvam bhumim prithivim indraguptam. You know, surprisingly, earth has got two synonyms. One synonym is Vishwambhara. Vishwamparti means the Mother Earth that bears the burden, the troubles, takes responsibility for all her children. The other one is Vasundhara. it supports, it takes care of all its children. So some of these terms used are also used as synonyms to mean mother. So the idea that earth is mother, and all that you find in this world is mentioned here, Girayaste Parvada Himavando Aranyam Te Prithvi means, mountains. Giraya means mountains. Giraya means mountains. Then the snow-clad tops of mountains, which are full of snow. That is called Himavanta. Aranyam, forest, trees. Then, Krishnam Rohini means, and then different animals, different living creatures with different names. Medicinal plants, flowers, gardens, oceans, rivers, lakes, all these are mother's gifts to a human being, to be equally shared and enjoyed by all living creatures, not only human beings, living creatures. Animals also have their right to live in this world. So, what it means is, milk and honey, all these are used here, implied here. All these are different products, gifts of nature, gifts of Mother Earth, which are meant to be used by not only human beings, but by all living beings. This is an ancient concept. And then in another verse it says, Yatte madhyam prithivi yachanabhyam yaste ujastanva. Somewhere it says, Putro aham prithivyaha. Aham prithivyaha putra means, I am the son of Mother Earth. So the great Vedic sage, he sings, I am the son of Mother Earth. And Mother Earth has so many sons and daughters, not only human beings. And again, this Vedic scheme, it emphasizes, stresses the idea, the right to enjoy the blessings of the earth are not limited to human beings alone, but can be extended to the animal kingdom also. Not only animal kingdoms, a plant has a right to exist, a tree has a right to exist. Some time back I said, in ancient, there is a verse, there is an interesting Sanskrit verse, which says, a woodcutter should ask the permission of the tree to cut it off. Well, this may look, it doesn't mean that woodcutter looks upon the tree as God. Never imagine that this kind of pantheism, not at all. It is not pantheism. It is pure humanism. Or rather, humanism itself means it centers around human being. But by humanism, if you mean compassion, understanding, harmony, or living with others, then that word is okay. So humanism be going beyond humanity. I mean, every plant, every tree, every animal has a right to exist. That's the idea behind. So not only human being, but also all the plants and trees are children of Mother Earth. Again, we should not ever misunderstand that this is a kind of pantheism. Pantheism means equating external nature with God, some kind of a deity, not at all. It is just an ideal of harmony and peace and compassion and interrelatedness of all that exists in this world. That interrelatedness. In some of the scriptures means Vasudha eva kudumbakam. Vasudha eva kudumbakam. This earth itself is family. That's the literal meaning. This earth means all the living beings on this earth, which includes not only living human beings or animals, but also trees and mountains and valleys. We can imagine, if you pollute air and water, then you can't live in this world. Nature hits you back. Sometimes we say we must take care of nature. Actually, nature is taking care of us. If you forget that, the nature will hit you back. And as a result, the tsunamis and global warming and floods, all this happens. So nature's way of politely reminding us that the earth doesn't belong to human beings alone. That's the idea behind. That's how it floods. Polite reminders. Sometimes the reminders are not always polite. It can take devastating forms, as happened during the time of tsunamis and so on. Big floods, which caused the loss of lives for hundreds of, maybe thousands of people. It happened. So that's why Putro Aham Prithivyaha. I am the son of Mother Earth. And the next verse it says, Parjanya Pida. And my father is clouds. This is a symbolic presentation. It's a metaphor. It essentially means that we are children of Mother Earth or Mother Nature. It doesn't mean that you should not bridge a canal or a dam across a river to generate electricity. We should do that, of course. And also we have to use rivers for navigation, for transportation. Of course, we have to use lakes and rivers for irrigation. Absolutely. But when we exceed a limit, nature itself has a way of reminding us that we have made a mistake. So we should stop before it is too late. Global warming is a big term, but actually it doesn't cover all the concerns related to this. It's only industrial pollution, global warming creates problems. You have to find a solution. But the real solution comes only when we change our perspective, the way we look at Mother Nature and the resources of Mother Nature. That's where the yajna concept comes. Living together, living harmony with nature, living in perfect coordination with nature, living the other person, admitting the other person's right to live, the idea behind. It continues then, sa u na pipartu. What it means, see. So, the verse tells you that, O Mother Earth, you have given us a place in your womb. It's a literal metaphor. And then you have given us all that we need to sustain our life in this world. Now you also give us wisdom to make proper use of your gifts. You have given us gifts. What are the gifts? The rivers, which help us to irrigate field, generate electricity, maybe increasing food grain production. So also the oceans, which help us to navigate. All the great things that happened from 15th century onwards happened because of man's incessant continuing urge to go in search of new ways of making use of the gifts of nature. But you also should give us the wisdom, the intuition, the higher wisdom, a sense of balance that alone can help us to make proper use of your gifts and to desist from making improper use of your gifts. That's the idea behind. It continues like this. Bhume Mata Nidhehi Ma Bhadraya Supradishthidam Samvidana Diva Kave Sriyam Ma Dhehi Bhutyam. Now it continues like that. Water supports fire. And fire exists in earth, on earth. And this fire and water exist in everything. So Oshadeha, Vanaspatha means the medicinal plants, the trees, rocks, animals, and so on. So fire and water together are metaphors for the basic human existence. You cook with the help of fire, and you cannot live in this world without water. So for human life, water is important, and fire principle is essential for sustenance of life. These are great gifts from you. So in this context, the Vedic sages talk about three fundamental values that should guide our relationship, our interaction with Mother Earth while making use of the gifts of Mother Earth. It is called Satyam, Dharmam, Satyam, Dharma, Rita. The three words are used in Vedic literature. Of his Ritam means, Rhythm basically it means some higher principle mentioned in scriptures. But in Vedic, in these particular suktas, it means a kind of interrelatedness, what do you call interconnectedness, the inner harmony that runs through everything in this world. Not only in nature, but also in our actions. For example, if you cut down trees, destroy forest through deforestation, what happens? Our next generation, next generation won't get their daily meal, because deforestation can cause famine, can affect rainfall, and it can also eventually cause global warming and also many innumerable problems for human beings. So cutting down trees by itself may look an innocent thing to do, but it has long-term consequences. So there is an interconnectedness. You cut down trees, and at some point of time in future, you face a famine. You pollute the air and water, at some point of time, it can cause epidemics to emerge, diseases, and again famine and destruction in nature. So there is an interconnectedness. You cannot do something without expecting some unpleasant consequences. This is called rhythm, an underlining interconnecting link between our actions and what happens in nature as a result of our actions. And now dharma. Dharma means a sense of duty and righteous action. In living, in speaking, in interacting with others, we should not violate the principles of rhythm or interrelatedness. So our actions and thoughts and words should not be in violation of this fundamental principle of interrelatedness and inner harmony. It is called dharma. So dharma has got a higher meaning in Buddhist tradition, but it is also linked to this. See, the word dharma means dharite iti dharma, means something that supports, preserves, or helps you to preserve. That's what dharma stands for. If we practice dharma, it preserves and supports our life. So a person who continues doing things which are opposed to the principle of dharma, eventually his own mind will turn against him. That's an interesting thing the Vedic sages mention. If we do something wrong to our own mind, by deceiving our own mind, then our own mind will hit back. And that retaliation of our own mind against ourselves will take the form of depression and so on. So any act of adharma or violating the principles of interrelatedness or inner harmony nature can cause many unpleasant consequences. That is dharma. Satya means truth. It means the highest principle. I mean, practicing dharma, practicing righteousness, and practicing this principle of inner harmony or interrelatedness living our life, interacting with Mother Nature, without deviating from the path of this inner harmony, that is Satyam. So very great ideas you find here. Of course, remember, this Bhumi Suktam, Prithivi Suktam, normally they are chanted by the Sanskrit Pandits. In fact, I also belong to that tradition. But if you understand today's world, and if you reread and try to reinterpret some of these ancient hymns, you can find they have a great message for our times, going back to nature. Just as we should not fight with our own mind, so also we should not fight with nature. The farther we go away from nature, the greater there is a danger. The danger not only in our mind, but also outside of our mind. Just as we deceive ourselves, and our mind also takes the consequences, bears the consequences. Because mind, if you go on doing things which are not correct, which are against dharma, then mind also slowly becomes our enemy, and that mind again will turn against us. Similarly, nature, Mother Nature also will turn against us if we violate this inner harmony, the concept of rhythm. This is a very important concept you find in Vedic literature. We should always live in close harmony with nature. It doesn't mean that we should go back to bull cart age. We should not make use of rivers and mountains. We should live like primitive beings. Not at all. It doesn't mean that. Even that's why this Vedic Sukta says we have every right to make all use of the gifts of nature. Children have their right to inherit the property, the resources of their parents, the mother especially. But at the same time, when they inherit, when they make use of the gifts of mother, they should not violate the principles of this interrelatedness. Then Mother Nature will also, as I mentioned earlier, will remind us of our own wrongdoing, and that takes the form of global warming and many things. And again, as I mentioned earlier, greed, man's greed, the human greed for more resources is an indication that we are actually trespassing, we are violating the principle of interrelatedness. That's the idea behind. So then there is another interesting sutta. Agnir bhumyam oshadishu Agnim Mapo Bhivatya Agnirasmu Agniranda Purusheshu Goshu Ashweshu Agneha Agnir Diva A Tapadyagne Devasya Urvandriksham Agnim Martasa Indhade Havyavaham Kridapriyam. So what it means is this. This particular sukta you find different. Agni means fire principle, not just blazing fire, but fire principle. Agni is conceived to be the essence of life, because without Agni, human beings cannot sustain their life. Therefore, in the Vedic mantras, you find the first mantra in Rigveda Samhita, Agni Mile, means we propitiate, we bow down, we extol the fire Agni is mentioned here. So this particular suktam, I mentioned earlier, it emphasizes the idea that is mentioned here. Trees, mountains, valleys, rivers, oceans, clouds, everything. They are all helping us in preserving our life. And they help us by supplying our sustenance, by giving us plenty of water and plenty of different manifestations of the fire principle. Means water is not enough, but without our water we cannot live. But also the sun, the sunlight, which is the essence of human existence. All these are different gifts of nature. So this particular suktam, it actually elevates the status of Mother Earth to the status of our own mother, our own divine mother. Again, I want to emphasize, in the Vedic literature, there are 5 levels of concepts of the divine, concepts of God or divine. Pantheism, pantheism, polytheism, monotheism, and monism. These are 5 different interpretations of the Vedic concepts of God. The first one is pantheism. So here we are not discussing pantheism. What it essentially means is we should live in perfect harmony with nature. So the human greed, the urge for more and more resources, which actually result in different kinds of actions, that can be checked only if we change the way we look at Mother Earth and Mother Nature. I don't want to mention, but I want to emphasize the relevance of the sutta in modern times. I mentioned this earlier. If you look at the history of human civilization, especially from 15th century onwards, the beginning of Columbus' journey in search of a new continent, it was America, and Vasco da Gama's journey in search of, again, he actually went for resources only. He went in search of black pepper. So these are great things, human endeavors. But what it resulted was misery, death and genocides, and disappearance of whole civilizations. You can just imagine, of course, history is inseparable from these topics. When you talk about the modern political problems or social problems, you cannot leave out history. You can imagine how Pizarro and Cortes dealt with the native people when they landed a new continent. You can imagine. So all these are examples where the urge for new continents, in a way, indirectly, it helps to unify humanity. And also sharing of resources from one continent to another continent. But then again, to monopolize, to bring all the resources to one's own country and turn into finished products, and again export back to the very country from where we took away all the resources. This is a manifestation of human greed. So also industrial evolution. All the gifts of science and technology, industry and commerce, all can have a very good positive utility value, absolutely. It can be an unmixed blessing for humanity, but frequently it also becomes, indirectly, it becomes a curse in the long run. So also, the modern ideologies, for example, communism developed as a response to some of the social problems that existed in mid-19th century Europe. But again, it became a monster itself. It became a much worse problem than the problem it tried to resolve. So this happens frequently. And again, the emergence of modern capitalism and so on. All these ideologies can be considered to be different stages in the evolution of human civilization, human culture. They are inescapable. Every ideology, every movement will have a response from another corner. That's part of human history. But the point is, once we keep back the idea, keep in our mind the idea that Earth or the gifts of Mother Earth do not belong to one nation or one culture or one race, but they belong to the entire humanity, and also not only human beings, but also animal kingdoms included. Again, every mountain, every forest, every tree and every river has a right to exist in its pristine purity without being interfered by human beings. But we sometimes forget. Maybe for a short time there will be prosperity, but in the long term it can lead to many of the problems that we are facing today. So we'll continue this discussion from another angle, again referring to some ancient Vedic texts. My purpose is not to give a discussion on some of the existing contemporary political problems, but after mentioning that, how some of these problems can find solutions in some of our ancient, long forgotten texts belonging to Vedic tradition. Thank you. You are most welcome to ask questions during interaction. Namaskar. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Pranamastu. Now we have announcements. Subject for next Sunday is again the same subject, spiritual solutions to contemporary political problems. I will not discuss directly the political problems, but indirectly we'll hint and then we'll find some ideas from the ancient Vedic literature. As I mentioned earlier, there are many platforms where these subjects are discussed from a different perspective, but our purpose is to take a look at, a glance, a peep into the ancient Vedic text. A different ancient world where much before what we now call modern civilization emerged, how ancient sages thought of some of these ideas. For example, think of looking at Mother Earth as our mother and ourselves as visitors to this Mother Earth, without the copyright for everything that Mother Earth has provided us, without monopoly. So that idea, that kind of concept, and the idea of living in perfect harmony with nature, with perfect harmony with others, we can't hurt another person without eventually hurting ourselves. So this kind of idea of spiritual unity and oneness of humanity and existence, that's the idea behind it. So on Sunday evenings, there is an online class at 6 p.m. on the subject is the foundational text of Indian philosophy. See, more of an academic program. The purpose is to interpret some of the ancient texts, not necessarily books, but statements and quotations from different ancient texts belonging to all the systems of Indian philosophy, the 12 systems of Indian philosophy, plus all the different schools of Buddhism and Jainism. That's the purpose. So that's going on. It's been going on for some time. So the topic is the foundational text of Indian philosophy. The Zoom and YouTube links are available on our website's homepage, as well as in the monthly email bulletin. On Wednesday evenings, we have Vespers with meditation at 7:30 p.m. in this auditorium. On Friday evenings, there is a scripture class at the Old Temple at 7:30 p.m. Please use the auditorium entrance on Filbert Street. The current text for study is the Bhagavad Gita. Friday, 7:30, the Old Temple. It's an in-person class. Your cooperation in wearing a mask is greatly appreciated. If you would like to make an offering, a collection plate will be available on the cart out the door as you exit. There is also a mounted offering box near the auditorium door in the foyer. You and your friends are cordially invited to attend all of our services. After the lecture, there will be a question and answer session in Vivekananda Hall, and all are welcome. Thank you. Namaskar.